So today we are going to talk all about a topic that's full of kind of the questions we've received since we started RVing, and they all have to do with the costs. How much does it actually cost to RV? Are we saving money by doing this, or are we spending way more than we would in our house? What are some of those pros and cons, things to consider, and how do you really plan a budget for a lifestyle that looks totally different maybe than what you're used to doing right now? So what types of questions have you heard, babe, that, kind of translated into we need to do a video about this?
Yeah, I mean, it was fuel costs was a big one. How much do you spend on fuel? Another big one was can I truly save money between doing this or living in a traditional home? Some of the other ones, can I afford this with X budget, right? So it might be somebody is on a fixed income and they are just curious if they can actually do this on a fixed income. I will say all those questions totally depends, right? There's no right or wrong answer to any of that. There's no real solid answer for us to give you. It all depends on your situation and how you're going to spend. What we're going to talk about is sort of some of the experiences that we've had and some of the ways to help mitigate cost, plan your budget, right? To understand how to make this thing work. The other thing, we hinted at this in last week's video, but we have as thrilling as a topic as financing and budgeting is for RV living, we have an even bigger thing at the end of this video that you really need to stick around for because it's really going to change the look and feel of this channel entirely.
Yeah.
So stick around for that till the end. So on like I said, this week's video is going to cover a lot of those things, but you got to keep in mind some of the things that we're going to say are specific to what ours looks like. So it's really dependent on what you want to see and what you want to do and those types of things. Sort of what your overall budgeting should look like.
It's really going to depend too on the style of RVing you want to do because it's such a vast range. You can stay on free land in a tent or a little teardrop sized trailer, a van, or you can get a $200,000 luxury motorhome and stay in luxury RV resorts, and that's going to cost you more than most houses will. So it really does depend what you're looking for in RV travel. For us, we travel every few weeks in a travel trailer and truck that we had purchased during the pandemic. And so we already had our RV set up to go, but if you're looking at going RVing for the first time, that's also going to be a cost that we didn't have because we already had the RV in the truck.
So that's a good segue into our first section, which is the fixed costs, right? The things that you need to know about. From that perspective, that should be the same regardless of where you go, are your fixed costs. Your fixed costs include your
any payments
that you make,
RV
so
that you might have.
RV, truck,
tow vehicle,
yeah, those types of things. You'll also have relatively fixed costs when it comes to your utilities because those are almost always built into the rate of your campground. There are campgrounds though, especially when you do monthly, that you're going to pay for electric, and then your gas, you will have sort of I guess you can call it a gas bill, but it's really your propane, right? But that goes into a variable cost that we'll talk about later. But your fixed costs are they're very similar to the fixed costs that you would have at a home.
Right. Most people have a mortgage on their house.
Yep. They
you
pay
might
for
have
a vehicle.
those types of costs. So you already know how much you're spending on your car payment, for example. If you already have a truck and you're just going to be adding a trailer or a fifth wheel to that, or if you're going to go out and purchase an RV that you may or may not have a payment on, right? A lot of people do buy them with cash. They might buy a used one, something like that. So that again is going to vary a little bit from person to person, but you'll know going into it what those costs will be, and they'll stay the same from month to month.
Next section we're going to talk about is the campground and site fees that you're going to experience. That's a very variable amount that you're going to pay, and it's very geographic, I would say. Mm-hmm. So if you're in a specific state, you you can experience very similar rates regardless of where you go, with the exception being, I would say, in national parks. So when you stay in national parks, you do pay a premium for that, because it's harder to get services into there, and they can just charge more because it's supply and demand, right? So if you are staying in a national park, even for a boondocking site, sometimes you do have to pay fees for that, which traditionally that's not, you really don't have to do that. So on BLM land, you can stay for free and things like that. But
So if you haven't heard of BLM land, that's a Bureau of Land Management land. It's very common in the western part of the United States, which is where we're traveling, and that is free land where you can go out and boondock without any hookups. But I think you can stay about 2 weeks in one spot before you have to move completely free. So that's a great option if you're not as reliant maybe on internet and things like that, because a lot of times those places are a little more remote. They're in forests or national
yeah,
parks.
so keep that in mind if you are somebody who needs to really restrict yourself from a budgeting perspective. This is probably the best way to do it. The best way to cut costs is really what you're paying for your mortgage or your rent is your site fees. So you can get a site that is $80 a night. You can get a site that is completely free, and anywhere in between. The one caveat I would say with that to keep in consideration if you're going to boondock for an extended period of time is be very aware of the weather. Because if you're in a cold environment and you go boondocking somewhere where you're using a lot of your propane, you're going to end up paying quite a bit for that cost that you wouldn't otherwise have if you stayed in a campground and could use an electric heater. So that's something to keep in mind as well, from your fixed cost perspective. But I would say in general, you can pretty well budget between $40 and $60 a night, depending on where you're at. If you're staying in full hookup sites, I think that's pretty good.
Assuming you're not at like resort type properties, right, like Disney World, Camp Wilderness. That's one of the most expensive places in the country. If you're staying at a very high caliber, like a Jellystone resort, those are usually going to be hundreds of dollars a day, from what I understand. We have not done any of that luxury camping, but those do get to be a lot pricier than what we would consider. What do we consider normal campsites? I guess what we're talking about here. Are we talking state parks? Are we talking private campgrounds?
Yeah.
What are you using for those numbers?
Well, it's both, right? We've stayed in state parks in Oregon, and we've stayed in private parks where they're all the same amenities. So you can get full hookup campsites in state parks. Those tend to be a little bit cheaper, just because, again, they're sort of state ran, so they don't have the incentive to make a bunch of money off of people. So you can get some pretty nice locations with full hookups. They're usually a little older, and they don't necessarily have all of the amenities that maybe a private campsite is going to have, like a pool or a playground or things like that. On-site laundry, Wi-Fi, which we don't really use the Wi-Fi anyway, but they don't have those amenities that maybe a private campground is going to have. So it really, that range there, that 40 to 60, can get you a really nice state park by a river with full hookups, or it can get you a private campground with a swimming pool. We've experienced both of that. Specifically in Oregon, we literally had both of those situations, and they were about the same price.
Well, and that's something too, depending on the state you're in. There are certain parts of the country where it's cheaper to own a home and cost of living overall is cheaper. And then there are states that are known for being more expensive places to live. And I would say that's kind of true of the campgrounds too. So if you're looking to save money, stay in some of those less expensive regions of the country probably. Do not go to, places that are very high-end cost of living wise, because you are going to spend more money just in general, both on the campsites, and then food costs, entertainment, all of that is also going to be inflated more in those locations.
I will say one sort of trick to this though too is if you're staying in private campgrounds versus state campgrounds don't typically offer this, but if you're staying in private campgrounds, look for sites or campgrounds that will offer, buy 6 days, get the 7th night for free. You get a really good discount when you do those things, or monthly stays if you're able to sort of stay in an area for an extended period of time. They typically offer monthly rates, and you get a much better deal than you would if you were just staying nightly. For example, we have a site that we are currently staying at that it averages out to about $72 a night. It's kind of expensive. We're in an expensive part of the country, but if we were to stay nightly here, it would be $100 a night. So it's a pretty big savings over a 30-40 day time period that we're staying here, that we'll be able to save quite a bit of money. It's really relative, right? So
Because that place we stayed in Idaho for multi-weeks, that
Right.
one ended up being very inexpensive.
it was like
So
$12 a night.
yeah, it was awesome. Also, I know there are some programs if you're like a senior citizen where you can get a discounted rate. My parents have used that. I think you have to be 55 or older, and then you can get, I don't know if it's a state park pass or something, but I mean, $12 a night is very typical of a lot of the places they stay, but it has to do with their age.
Good Sam
so-
also offers a 10% discount usually on a lot of sites. If it's a Good Sam sponsored site, you can also get that discount. This one might be my favorite category, the fuel. So we have fuel and maintenance.
It's such a
but
man thing, I think.
So we have fuel and maintenance. I'm gonna keep out the maintenance part of this because I think fuel is really the cost, because your maintenance costs for your rig that you're pulling doesn't really, it's no different than if you had a vehicle back home, right? Unless you're
Kind of. I would say Class A, Class B, Class C, where you're driving in the RV, is a very different cost than a travel trailer or a fifth wheel that you're towing behind. Because oftentimes those repairs can be astronomically more expensive.
Yeah, but it's okay. So that's fair, but we don't have enough. We don't have enough information on how much those types of things cost to really
Yeah.
get into the maintenance side of it. If you have a tow vehicle, your maintenance costs are pretty much going to be the same as if you had a regular vehicle at the house. Meaning, if you have a truck that pulls a trailer, your maintenance fees for that, you're going to rotate your tires about the same frequency, you're going to change your oil about the same frequency, you're going to change your fuel filters about the same frequency. So
And what about somebody though that's more stationary versus somebody traveling a lot?
So that's where you can get into but it goes into how much fuel you're using too. So I think that's a good kind of piece to say, depending on how much you travel is how much more your costs will be. So if you drive more than you did when you were back home, your maintenance fees will go up because you're going to have oil changes more frequently, you're going to have tire rotations more frequently, your tires are going to wear out more frequently. So that is a cost that is flexible. But I would say that the biggest category here that is going to make the most impact from a budgeting perspective is going to be your fuel usage. So, and that is also a geographical
I was
thing
going to
that
say,
you need
because
to take
gas
into
prices are
consideration.
different in different places. Diesel versus gas are different too, depending on
Yep.
what that tow vehicle is. Now, I'm glad we're traveling in 2023 and not, was it 2021 when fuel prices went very high in the summer? Our truck's a diesel. What have we seen though as we've kind of traveled through the West, just so people have a general idea as far as like average fuel costs, would you say?
So when we were leaving Colorado, they were right around the $4 mark, a little under, a little over, depending on where you were. As we started to go north and west, they actually got cheaper. So through Wyoming and Montana and Idaho, it was sub 4 for sure. As we started to get towards the coastal areas, and then we hit the state of California, the prices skyrocketed. So we're looking at over $5 a gallon right now, pretty consistently. Sometimes even closer to 6. So it really depends on where you're at. Now the good thing is we have planned this out, specifically, and this is how you sort of want to think through these things too. So at the very beginning, I knew that the fuel costs were going to be relatively cheap, so we drove a lot really early on, right?
And
we
fast. We moved
moved
thousands
quickly.
of miles the first few weeks.
Yeah, we went 2,000 miles in the first month, I think. So we made a lot of headway really quickly. And then as we started to slow down and have campsites that were closer, we drove a lot less. So therefore, our fuel consumption actually, from an overall dollars perspective, that first month was the heaviest month. We spent the most money from fuel in our very first month of travel. As we've gotten further, even though the prices have gone up, we've actually spent less overall.
So if you want to save money, travel less frequently.
Yep.
Especially in our case, when we're towing the trailer, we're getting a lot less miles per gallon than when we're parked with the trailer in one spot for several weeks and just using the truck for normal, driving to places like we would.
We get about 10 miles to the gallon with the truck when we're towing. When we're not towing, we can get up to about 16 if we're lucky, going downhill with the wind behind. But yeah, it's we do some driving without the tow vehicle, but we stay relatively close to where we're at. We don't drive typically now, especially since we're away from the locations where we were literally 100 miles away that we had to get to locations, we don't put as many miles on the truck, which means our fuel costs actually do go down. So
that's something to weigh when you're looking at campsites, right? There might be a cheaper campsite here, but if it's farther from all the things you want to see and do, your fuel costs might end up offsetting that. So just paying attention to that. But a great way to save money when you're RVing is just not to move as fast. People that either stay in one spot for 6 months or more, or people that just kind of slow their travels down to maybe you're moving once or twice a month as opposed to every few days, you're going to save a ton on those fuel costs.
food and groceries. This might be Sunny's favorite topic. I don't know. That is a very, very variable. Yeah. I mean,
very variable. Because again, traveling regionally, your food costs are going to be kind of dependent on where you're at, their access to, fresh produce. What are they shipping in? You can probably offset some of those costs with local farmers markets and things. But also, if you're going out to eat versus cooking in the camper, that's going to change your costs a lot as well. Something that I have found though, since we started RVing really, is that we do cook more at home in the RV than we probably do at home when we're in our house for a couple of reasons. One of those is we have the smaller kitchen, so you really do need to plan your meals, figure out your grocery trips in a way that when you're in your hometown and you're like, oh, I'll just run to the store and pick up something for a couple of days, then you might have those days where you're like, oh, we don't have any food in the house. Let's just go out to eat. It's faster, it's easier, whatever. Also, too, when we're traveling, we don't necessarily know where the best restaurants are, or some of them may have very bad reviews, or if you're in a smaller town, there may just not be a lot of options. And so it is a good idea to plan your meals, know what you're going to do. And we really plan now only to go out to eat once or twice a week, which that's good for us. I know that might seem like a lot to some people, but when we're at home, we eat out more frequently than that, I would say. So that's something that is going to save you money there. But really, you're going to want to look at, okay, how much are we eating, our meal plans, where are we buying groceries at, all of those different things. Something that we have found super convenient since we started traveling is we look up the grocery store near us that we can have them put everything in the cart for us, and then we just go by and pick it up. That saves us time. I was telling Brandon, I hate when we go to a new place because then I have to figure out where everything is in that grocery store. They're all organized differently and it's a pain, it's time consuming. But the nice thing, if you're building your cart online, you can also see what's my total going to be before I get to the register. You don't have to do all that math in your head or anything like that. So if you are really carefully watching your food budget, that's something that might help too.
Yeah. Yeah. So very variable costs, right? It's all really, this category is really up to you. You can spend as much or as little as you think you would here. One thing to keep in mind is that, again, geographically, it's more expensive in certain locations. So as we, again, got down into California, things did go up. So I actually sort of planned ahead and bought some of my meat items before we got into California, and I have a freezer outside, so I'm able to freeze a lot of the meat, and then as we need it, I can thaw it out and cook it. But look for deals too. I bought 7 pounds of tri-tip for $3.97 a pound, or something around that number. But got a bunch of that and froze some of it.
Well, we have 2 freezers.
We have 2 freezers, so that's handy. Yeah.
Not everybody has that, but yeah, look at those types of things. Like I said, local farmers markets, you can probably find great produce for less too. So yeah, look at ways you can save just like you would at home, but just know that if you're traveling in a more expensive area, the food is going to be more expensive as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the next category we want to talk about is, it's really kind of the open-ended entertainment and activities. This is completely dependent on what you want to do. I don't think this is a geographic based item, because we found that there is a theme park in Idaho that's really awesome, but we spent money doing that. It's a theme park.
Not inexpensive, yeah.
Yeah. So the movie theaters, the tickets are pretty much going to be the same unless you find like the small town one that we found, which was $6 for a matinee price.
Lebanon, Oregon.
Yep.
1-room theater.
But there's ways to find inexpensive entertainment, or there's ways to find expensive entertainment depending on what you want to do. If you want to rent a boat and go on the lake for 2 days, that's going to be an expensive trip. If you want to just go to the lake and fish, that's $10 for worm and bait and everything else that you need if you already have your fishing pole and things. So it's one end or the other, I think, with this category, and it's totally depending on what you want to do. So we try to find sort of a mix, but we do like the free activities, like the national parks. Now I say free, but you need your national parks pass. So that's $80, I think, for the full year. So relatively inexpensive. I would consider that a cheap slash free option. We
Well,
can go to any national
You've
park.
already paid for it if you've gone, I want to say it's like 2 or 3
Yeah.
days to a park. So yeah, if you know you're going to do a lot of national parks like we have and do, it's a great benefit.
Yeah. So look for those sort of free hiking activities if you want to keep the budget down. Now, if you don't care, well, come find me so we can hang out and you can start paying for all of my activities that I want to do. But you can find other things to do that are inexpensive relative to the much more expensive things. Like the theme parks do get pricey, but when you're in an area and you get the opportunity to do something like that, I would say if you can do it, that's part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing. It's not so we can save a bunch of money, it's so we can go experience things. And so you can do that free or you can do that in other ways, I would say. It's a very variable category as well.
Well, and something that I do when we get to a new area is I Google what are the top things to do in this place. And a lot of times you'll get a list that will show you free or cheap activities as well. So the local parks, the river, the lake, whatever it might be, where there's free or very inexpensive things to do. And then they'll also share, oh, there's this children's museum with a ticket cost. There's a theme park. There's, obviously we talked about Disney World's Fort Wilderness Campground. If you're going there, I assume you're going to Disney World. So you're paying ticket costs to get into those places. Something else that wasn't free initially because we had to buy my paddleboard, but we bought a paddleboard that we take with us. And then now I can paddleboard almost anywhere for free. So that's something that you have the upfront costs. But again, like Brandon said, we are traveling so we can experience things. If you are a stationary RVer and you're looking to save money, or maybe you're just looking for a cheaper way to travel, I would say overall, we find a lot of inexpensive ways to travel. It's pretty easy, I think, to budget for those things too. If you know you're going to an area where you're going to spend a lot, okay, before you get to that area, let's look at what are some free slash cheap things to do. There are walking historical tours almost anywhere that are not going to cost you much if you're not like an outdoor nature-y person. I know I was talking about nature things, but there's walking tours in cities too that are inexpensive. If you like to window shop, I don't like that. Some people do, I know.
Okay, so the last thing that we want to discuss, at least in sort of the categories that we have broken out, is the actual physical budgeting part of it. So highly recommend using Excel. Get yourself a spreadsheet set up. It's really easy, and you can really compare your costs as you go. So up front, one of the things that we did was we sat down and we said, okay, we think that we're going to spend X number of dollars in these different categories, and then every month we do a recap on how much we've spent to see where we're spending extra, where we're spending less, like are we staying on budget and things like that. Spoiler, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It just depends. Again, those geographical things I think really play a big part of it. And if you do this, if you plan this out holistically, I think you're going to have a much better feel for how to do it. So we're not looking at month to month, how are we doing? We are looking at the whole thing.
Cost
right?
of a year, how much would we normally spend in that year
Right.
if we were in our home versus being on the road. And so I would recommend that too. If you don't really know how much you're spending monthly at home, you might want to do a few months of that just to see what your average spend is there so that you can truly compare it to your costs once you're on the road to see, are you saving money? Are you spending way more? What does that look like?
Well, and use those as your budgetary planning for your month, your first month, your second month, your third month. Those should be your categories, and you should be able to say, okay, I spent this much when I was in the house. Now I'm spending this much, and just kind of track it till you get an idea. You might be able to level set your RV expenses once you get 2 or 3 months down the road and really have a good idea. One of the things that, like I said, holistic looking is that we knew that once we got into California, our expenses were going to go up. So we have planned for that, knowing that early on we didn't spend as much, And as we get towards the end of the year that we're going to be on the road, those costs will go down again as we get into the places that aren't as expensive as California. So you might look at things like that too when you're looking at the Northeast. The Northeast can get very expensive, but if you plan it to where you're going to be in the expensive areas and then go to the less expensive areas as you go, you can offset a lot of those costs. So just keep that in mind. That's how I would sort of attack that.
So for us, we've talked about all the different categories and ways to plan your budget or figure out what's important to you when you're traveling. So you're probably wondering, for us, what's the answer? Has it been more or less expensive, or what we thought it was going to be, or what? And like Brandon said, it has varied from month to month. We've had more expensive months and less expensive months. But spoiler, the most expensive month was actually the month that we moved out of our house, because we still had some bills on our house, some utilities and things to do there, as well as the costs of moving our things to storage and all of that to get on the road. So that has been our most expensive month. But overall, we are spending less traveling full time than we were in our house. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that we rented out our house, and so we are now making money on our house, which is something that we were just spending money on when we lived there. So that is a new stream of income that we did not have before. And so that has been great for also giving us more money to work with. But even our expenditures have been less. Why do you think that is, babe, with the way that we have traveled?
Well, we're planning things out a lot more because we have to, right? When you're in a space where you are limited with your fridge freezer and you don't necessarily have easy access to grocery stores and things like that, where you might have to drive 10 or 15 minutes to the grocery store to pick up your stuff. So you don't really want to do that constantly. Maybe back at home, I think that it was a convenience thing. Hey, we're going to be going to somewhere this evening. We'll pick up stuff on the way back home, things like that. So we're definitely saving money from that on food costs because we're planning things out. We also don't have food just sitting in our fridge freezers because it's we know it's specifically for meals. So we're not.
So we're probably wasting less.
We're wasting a lot less groceries that way. Things don't get buried in the back that we don't know about. We're like, oh, what is this thing back here? I didn't even know it was back there.
Here. What is that?
Yeah. So I think that's a big cost savings for us. We are spending more on fuel, but we're offsetting all of that with, I mean, even if we didn't rent out the house and it was just a net wash and we didn't make any money off of it, we're spending a lot less on our overall living expense. So utilities are less. The actual physical rent, I'll say, right? So your campground fees are less than what our mortgage is. So we're saving money there pretty significantly. I'd say those are the two biggest things for sure.
And for us, even in an expensive area, our campground costs are still less than our mortgage because we live in kind of an expensive area. If you are coming from an area where your housing is cheap, you may not find that. But for us, it's definitely been less expensive. Another thing, you mentioned we might be miles from a grocery store. There's a lot less impulse purchases in general for us when we're on the road. Yes, we're buying souvenirs and places, and I've got my little collection of magnets on the fridge from all the places we go, those types of things. But I am no longer saying, oh, this is cute online and adding it to my shopping cart.
Our Amazon bill has gone down tremendously
because our address moves too much. It's just really inconvenient. So I know they say in all sorts of things, if you're trying to break a habit, if you make it inconvenient, oftentimes it's easier to break a habit. And so if you are somebody who loves to boutique shop in stores, that might be more expensive while you're traveling. I don't know. But if you're an online shopper like myself and your address changes, I'm spending way less on those types of things. So for us, yeah, it has been cheaper, but that's not always the case.
No.
So be aware of that. If you want to luxury travel in a very high-end, $200,000 Class A, it's going to be very different. I would say that we are kind of middle of the road RVers in that we do have a long travel trailer and a newer truck, and so we're not tent camping or camping in just out of our vehicle with a very small setup. But at the same time, we are in a travel trailer and truck, which is cheaper oftentimes than Class A's or motorhomes, even the Class B camper vans. Those
or even
are
the fifth wheels.
Or fifth wheels are more expensive. Yeah, so we're kind of in that middle group of campers, but we're still having a really great time in the places we go. We still have the amenities of taking our home with us. So I don't feel like I'm rugged camping, if that makes sense. People that are like, oh, I would never do that because they're picturing you out in the woods without access to things. We have access to running water and electricity and all the things we would in our house. It's just a smaller space that happens to move.
So one of the questions that we talked about at the beginning is, can I do this with whatever budget? I think the answer is yes. Whatever your budget is, you can totally do. Maybe not this specifically, not that we have, the most expensive setup, which Sunny just said, but you can do it, I think, on any budget. It just depends on what you're willing to sacrifice or give up, and overall what you want to accomplish with it. Are you trying to save money? If so, you can make that work. There are ways to do that. It'll be probably a little bit uncomfortable, but you can totally do it. If you have a bigger budget, then you can definitely do it. So, it all depends on how you want to change your lifestyle, because it is a lifestyle change. You're going to do things differently. You have to. Whether you're trying to save money or not, you're going to do things differently, and you have to consolidate your space a lot and realize that you can't Amazon shop all the time. You can't just go get groceries and throw them in the fridge and have it for 2 weeks later, because it's not going to be, it'll get buried back there. Things like that. So, yes, you can do this. Go do it.
Yeah, go do it. I would say we have gone to places that we would never go and stay in a hotel because they are a little more remote. But when you're on a road trip with your trailer, it's easy to get to those places and you have your home with you. So I feel like we've seen parts of the country that we may never have visited if we were just going there for a week or two, 2 weeks vacation somewhere. So I absolutely think you should try it. If you have never RV'd, it might be a good idea to rent one or go with a friend who already has one, just to see if you like that part of it, because you do have to set up when you go places. You do have to tear down. There's a little more work involved. It's not like just walking into a hotel room where everything's ready to go. But for us, it has been, I think, incredibly freeing to get out, see things, meet people in different parts of the country. I want my kids to meet people that are not like them, and that's easiest done if you get out of your home environment and go try somewhere new.
Totally.
And we've been pleasantly surprised by areas that we thought there really wasn't anything to see there, and they've been some of our favorite places. So do it.
Do it now. Live life now.
Yeah, live your life now. Don't wait for one day and retirement and all that, because you may not have the opportunity later on.
Okay, are we ready for the big reveal?
Yes.
Okay, drum roll.
Shake the camera.
Sorry. So the big reveal that we wanted to let you guys all know, that we teased last week, is we had a logo designed specifically for us. So the one that you've been seeing, the Life Live Now logo, is going away, and we're going to a different logo that we had professionally designed.
A real graphic designer, not us.
Tried.
I thought Brandon did a great job, but neither one of us has any graphic design experience.
Yeah.
So we have, yes, a new professionally done logo.
And here it is. I'm just kidding. I won't put it over something.
Over my face.
We'll put it right here in the corner so you guys can all see it. But this is the new logo right here, and that will start showing up on all of our videos, including the outro exit to this video, which is coming up shortly. So thanks for joining us this week. If you have any tips or...
Sorry, I was going to throw something else in there real quick before you wrap this up.
Okay.
People were asking if our big announcement was that Brandon got his drone, because if you watched a few videos, we use hashtag get Brandon a drone. When we get to 500 YouTube subscribers, we will get Brandon that drone. So if you are not already subscribed, make sure you like and subscribe as well, so that when we get to 500 followers, we can hashtag get Brandon a drone.
That drone. So anyways, in conclusion, thanks for joining us this week. We know it's not necessarily a thrilling topic where we're scaling a mountain or anything like that, but this question gets asked all the time. We see it everywhere. So we thought it was a really important subject to discuss. And really, if you have any questions on this video or any questions as far as RV budgeting or just in general, you just send them to us. Add it to any of the videos that we have out there. But specifically for the financing and budgeting one, happy to answer anything. Just shoot the comments down below, and we'll be happy to answer those. But
And we'll be back to climbing mountains and waterfalls and things next week for you too.
next week, spoiler alert.